7 nurses from Darlington have won a case against an NHS trust after a transgender colleague was allowed to use female changing rooms. An employment tribunal has ruled that staff who complained that they had suffered harassment by the trust, which told them to broaden their mindsets. Our North of England correspondent, Katie Barnfield, is in Newcastle. It's a pretty important test in a way, isn't it, Katie, of the Supreme Court judgment midway through last year about the legal definition of a woman. Tell us more about how this played out and what the tribunal had to say.
It is indeed. This is really one of the first cases to actually test out that landmark Supreme Court judgment that was made in April last year, defining a woman as someone who was born female. And the Employment Tribunal, in this case here, upheld large parts of the complaints made by the nurses against their NHS trust for allowing their transgender colleague, Rose Henderson, who identifies as a woman but who was born male, to use a female changing room at Darlington Memorial Hospital. The tribunal said the trust had subjected the nurses to harassment by permitting their biological male trans woman colleague to use the female changing room, and also requiring the nurses to share that changing room without providing suitable alternative facilities. The tribunal also found the trust harassed the nurses by not taking seriously and declining to address their concerns. It said the behaviour of the trust violated the dignity of the claimants and created a hostile, intimidating, humiliating and degrading environment for them. It also upheld a claim of indirect sex discrimination against the trust. It said women are more likely than men to experience feelings of fear, distress and humiliation by, in effect, being required to change their clothes in front of a member of the opposite sex. The tribunal, I should say, though, did reject claims made by the nurses against Rose Henderson personally of harassment and victimisation. They said Rose had not behaved in a way to harass or victimise the nurses. It dismissed claims that Rose had behaved inappropriately towards them inside that changing room. Now, before this judgment was made, I sat down with all of the 7 nurses whose claims were ruled on today and talked to them about why they decided to bring this case. These 7 nurses went into battle with their employer, taking their NHS trust to court for allowing a transgender colleague to use a female changing room.
Our dignity has been affected. You know, it's not dignified to walk into a changing room and be expected to get changed in front of a male.
Particularly when you're just about to start a shift, you know, we need a safe space to get changed in. We undress to our bra and knickers, so, you know, it's not appropriate to have a biological male in there.
Their complaints are about Rose Henderson, an operating department practitioner who identifies as a woman. Rose Henderson first started working here at Darlington Memorial Hospital in 2019 and was allowed to use a female changing room under the Trust's transitioning in the workplace policy. In 2023, complaints from nurses began, and the following year, 26 women signed a letter complaining about Rose's use of the changing room and what they said was inappropriate behaviour inside it.
One nurse, Karen, who's with us today, she experienced a pretty traumatic event where the colleague would ask her, I think 3 times, whether she was going to get changed yet. And Karen's had some past trauma in her life, and she ended up having a panic attack in that situation.
Rose Henderson denied the claims of inappropriate behaviour, telling the tribunal, "I am not the individual they have painted me to be," and seeing the hordes of people online insulting me, my partner and my family has been difficult. The Nurses' Employment Tribunal case is one of the first to test the Supreme Court decision in April 2025 that defined a woman as someone who was born female. In December 2025, Scottish nurse Sandy Peggy won part of a similar case against NHS Fife. The tribunal found the trust had harassed her, but dismissed her claims against her trans colleague, Dr Beth Upton.
It simply isn't the case that the law says you must exclude trans women from changing rooms, lavatories.
Dr Victoria MacLeod was the UK's first transgender judge, now retired over concerns about trans rights and launching a legal challenge against the Supreme Court judgment.
The Supreme Court wasn't asked to and did not make any decision about women's spaces. I don't know any sensible lawyers who would say the For Women Scotland judgment was in any way clear. So we're seeing a lot of unpleasantness in society, and that stems directly from what I think is the willful misrepresentation of what admittedly is a very poorly written and poorly reasoned judgment.
What would you say to people watching this who might say, this is just transphobia?
They're demanding respect, but what about our feelings? You know, I would just like for them to respect our feelings as cis women, as they like to call us. You know, not everyone is comfortable with it.
I'm hopeful that women will gain some courage from seeing this, and there'll be more women that will use their voice to say, actually, I'm really not happy about what's been going on in our workplace.
Cases like this that debate the issue of women's spaces can stir up the strongest of feelings, and the arguments will continue, both inside the courts and out. Katie Barnfield, Sky News in Darlington. Well, we've just had in the last few minutes a statement from the Trust, from County Durham and Darlington NHS Foundation Trust. They say, we are taking time to review the judgment carefully and will comment further once we have had the opportunity to consider it in full.